Welcome to Trucks. You know, one question I've been getting a lot lately is what engine am I going to use in Sergeant Rock? There's been a lot of speculation about it on the websites and the chat rooms. It's been great because everybody agrees it needs to be special and it needs to be powerful. And that's true, it does. But it also needs to be something you can relate to, something you can build your own version of. And finally, it needs to be a Dodge. To put a Ford or a Chevy in that particular truck, that would just be wrong. So this is for you Mopar guys. Now, just what engine exactly? How many say the Cummins diesel? Good choice, there's a lot of power there. I considered it, but it's just too long. All right, how many say a big old Hemi? Another good choice, I considered that, a lot of power there. It's just too wide. How many think a new Hemi? Yeah, there is no way that I'm going to put this engine in that truck. Now, just a minute. I'm not saying this is a bad engine. There's just a couple issues here. First of all, it's pretty ugly. Second of all, if you punch this thing much over 400 horsepower, you're going to punch some stuff right out the bottom end. It's just not strong enough, and I need like double that horsepower. So, what am I going to use? Well, I got a question for you. What engine was in some of the most powerful muscle cars? What was in police cars and trucks? What engine was built in such volume that you could go down to a junkyard today and still buy one? You give up? Just three numbers, 440. This was the engine that really put Mopar on the map because it was tough, reliable, affordable, and incredibly powerful. Even the Hemi didn't want to mess with a well-built 440. Now, as good as the 440 was, there's always room for improvement. And if you have got a Mopar engine and you want to get some serious power out of it, you need to know about a place called Indy Cylinder Heads. Now, they've got kits and parts where you can build your own engine, or they have crate engines. And this is one of their crate engines, based off of the legendary 440 Wedge. But this isn't just your average 440. Just like that's not your average power wagon. This is a 605, and it's kicking out 850 horsepower, pulling 835 foot-pounds of torque, and doing it on 93 octane pump gas. Yeah, this sucker is a monster. Now, I know a lot of you guys are thinking, how is that possible? That's what I'm going to show you, starting with the block. Indy calls this their max aluminum block, and there's really nothing like it in the industry. It's whittled out of a big chunk of aluminum to save weight. The main caps are billet steel and cross-bolted for strength. It has a superior oiling system, and it'll handle massive amounts of horsepower and only weighs 133 pounds. This is an awesome piece. That block is then stuffed with a Callie's crank, and then on that crank go these Eagle forged steel H-beam connecting rods. Now, to cap these rods, we have Wiseco forged aluminum pistons with a special dish cut into them to keep that compression down. And then the main bearings and rod bearings and the piston rings all come from Federal Mogul. Then on the end, we've got an ATI super damper to keep everything smooth and keep vibration away. Now, to cover up that cool bottom end, we have one of Charlie's aluminum oil pans. It's got all the baffling in it and O-ring seal and low profile. Then to go in that pan, we have this special pivoting pickup from Indy Cylinder Heads. Now, this is really cool. Check this out. This thing pivots and follows the oil, which means it always keeps the pickup immersed in oil. That is really cool if you're racing or off-roading. Now, you would probably figure that anybody that had a name like Indy Cylinder Heads would have a smoking set of heads, right? Well, you're gonna love this. Once again, Indy carves their heads out of a solid chunk of aluminum, just like their blocks. The heads are then precision CNC machined around the rocker pedestals, the ports, the valves, the combustion chambers, and the end result is a head capable of 1,200 horsepower. Check this out. These things have huge intake runners that flow through 240 intake valves. You have a 70 cc combustion chamber. Then the exhaust goes out a 190 exhaust valve. There is some serious flow happening here. These heads with those pistons will give me a 10.5 to 1 compression ratio, which means this thing will run on pump gas. Yeah, now, let's take a look at the valve train. Up here on top, you have a Jessel roller rocker system opening and closing the valves. Now, to go with that trick valve train, we also have an external oiling system. Here's how it works. Oil comes up here, through the line, and into the valve cover here. Then you've got a line inside the valve cover, and each one of those spots is a pinhole. That blows oil right down on top of those rockers. Now, this not only lubricates better than oil coming up through the push rod, it also cools your valve train down. This is what most of your racers will use to make their valve train survive. Now, that takes care of the long block. Obviously, we have some pretty cool stuff up here on top. We're going to deal with that after the break. Welcome back to Trucks. Today we are talking about engines, big engines. Something big enough to power that huge Dodge military truck I'm building and turn those 50-inch tall tires with no problem. So, in place of that old flathead 6 that was once in there, I'm going to stuff in a big block Mopar in the form of this big wedge 605 that we got from Indy Cylinder Heads. Now, this is punching out 850 horsepower, 835 foot-pounds of torque, and doing it on pump gas. Yeah, this is sweet. Now, I've already talked you through the long block here. As you can see, there is not a carburetor up here. This thing's fuel injected. This is how it's laid out. Starting with one of Indy's aluminum intakes, it was drilled and plumbed for injectors and fuel rails from Fast Electronics. Now, this 4-barrel style billet throttle body is also from Fast, and it features tapered and radius throttle bores that allow it to flow 2,000 CFM of air. Yeah, that's getting it. I know you're probably thinking, oh, that's great, looks good, but that's the easy part. How are you going to make this thing run right? Good question. The answer's over here. For engine management, we went back to Fast and got what they call their XFI system. Now, basically, this is designed to remove all of the guesswork and all of the hassle that's normally associated with tuning an aftermarket EFI system. This will allow you to get the power and performance you want out of your engine without having a degree in computer programming. Now, of course, it comes with a complete wiring harness, the sending units, the hookups, everything is well marked. All you do is basically plug this thing in and route your wires. To take care of our ignition system, we went to MSD, got one of these Pro Billet distributors, some plug wires, and this HVC2 blaster coil. Now, these are great, but to make this stuff even better, we added to that this multiple spark discharge ignition control box. Now, this will make sure we get complete combustion of every bit of fuel that goes into that engine. These are 3 pieces that definitely complement each other and add up to give you an incredible ignition system. Now, you might be thinking, oh man, this is great. You have shown us some great stuff here today. But that 850 horsepower deal, that's an awful big number, man. How do you know that's accurate? Well, easy. Indy Cylinder Heads tests and dynos all of their kits and all of their engines, so you know exactly what you're getting. Your next question is going to be, what about cost? Everybody knows that horsepower costs money. There's no secret there. So obviously an engine like this is going to be a little expensive, but you get what you pay for. And most people don't need this much engine. See, that's the cool thing about Indy Cylinder Heads. You can go down, buy the parts that you need that fit your budget, and build the engine yourself on an existing 440. Or have them build it for you. But you're going to find that whichever way you go, what you get for what you pay is a heck of a deal. Hey, welcome back to Trucks. You know, I've spent a lot of time today walking you through the engine that is going in the Sergeant Rock project. And 850 horsepower in that truck is going to be so cool. But just how exactly am I going to get this big old thing stopped once I'm rolling down the road? That's a good question, because Rockwell axles aren't known to have the best brakes. But I've got an answer for you. It's right over here. Now, the Rockwell axles came stock with a big, heavy drum brake system that most people don't want to use, so they pull them off, and in its place, they put a single pinion brake up here on the drive shaft, and that's their brake system. Guys, don't do this for a couple of reasons. First of all, that is not enough brake to stop a vehicle that's going to be this heavy. Second of all, if you break an axle or you leave a hub unlocked, all of a sudden you have no connection between this spinning tire and that brake, which means that brake does nothing to stop that spinning tire, which means you basically have a runaway. Not good. So, what do? Well, you put on disc brakes over here. Now, this massive system comes from a place called Differential Engineering, and it is specifically designed for those big old Rockwells. And it's pretty much a bolt-in deal, provided you don't mind doing a little bit of prep work. First thing you need to do is take off your hubs, ship them to them. They start working on them, machine them down, and they graft them to these huge 15-inch rotors off a 2.5-ton international truck. This is enough brakes to stop you. Then they ship it all back to you with the rest of their kit, which includes bearings and brackets and calipers, which we'll talk about as I put this stuff in. The hubs, just a matter of sliding them in place of the original ones. Once the old stuff's out of the way, put on the new seal, followed by the new bearing, and finally that new rotor hub assembly. For calipers, they start with a stock piece off of a Ford F350 Super Duty, and then Differential Engineering machines them so they'll fit that big 15-inch rotor. Now, to hold those calipers, they've designed these special brackets that bolt right in place of your stock trunnion caps. Once they're on, all you have to do is install the caliper, and as you can see, Differential Engineering has finally solved the problem of how to put good brakes on Rockwells. A couple other areas that are worth upgrading on these axles are the end caps and the lockers. And for those, you need to check out a place called Overson Engineering because they build some killer stuff. Take a look at this. Their lockers are made out of 8620 case-hardened billet steel. Guys, this is the same stuff that 90% of your gear train is built out of. These should handle whatever extreme situations or shock loads you want to throw at them. And we are going to test them when we uncork that big engine. Now, for end caps, Overson Engineering also whittles those out of billet steel to give you a cap that is far stronger than the stock piece. It looks a lot better too. For your lockouts, the guys at Overson Engineering and Machine have really outdone themselves with this piece. On the outside, you have a billet aluminum housing, but inside is all packed with billet steel components. So this is tough, man. This will take a beating. Now, it's also precision machined, so it engages easily. That's nice. And it has an O-ring design, so you're not going to get any water, dirt, or mud packed inside here, which means it's going to last. Guys, if you are building a tough axle, you have got to use tough components or you're just wasting your time and money. We'll be right back after this. Hey, welcome back to Trucks, where I am continuing to lay out the components and the parts that I'm using on this Sergeant Rock project. Now, before the break, I took you through the braking system that I'm using on these axles. As you can see, this is a pretty sweet setup. But I know a lot of you guys are wondering, what kind of master cylinder system do you use with these kind of brakes? Answer is simple. A hydro boost system from Power Brake Service. Now, I know a lot of you think to get better brakes, you just put on bigger discs, right? Well, that's not necessarily so. Not if you don't have the line pressure to make those things work correctly. That's where a hydro boost comes in. It gets its power from the power steering pump, not engine vacuum. This little guy here can kick out up to 2,000 psi. Regular vacuum booster is about 500. And 2,000 psi is going to give you the clamping force to make those things work correctly. Also, you can run this system and a hydraulic steering system on the same power steering pump, so you don't have to rig up another power steering pump. So if you are interested in a Hydro Boost system, and you should be if you're running big tires, you need to check out Power Brake Service. They are on the cutting edge of this technology. They can help you out. Since we are on the subject of new technology, I got something I want to show you here. Now, no doubt you have seen my Patton's air system and figured that this was just a big, huge air tank, right? No, this is full of nitrogen. Not nitrous, nitrogen. And the purpose of it is to go in tires. Now, the question at this point would be, why would you want to do that? Well, number one, nitrogen is an inert gas, so it's not going to explode and kill you. Number two, it is dry, which means it's not going to corrode your rims. And number three, and this is the big one, nitrogen molecules are a lot bigger than oxygen molecules, which means they aren't going to seep out through the rubber or around the rim. And that means whatever pressure you put in the tire is pretty much going to stay there. And all that adds up to a tire that lasts longer and gives you better gas mileage. And that is a big deal right now. Racing teams, trucking firms, a lot of people have been using this stuff for decades. And now, Patton's makes it possible for you to have a nitrogen system in your own garage. And you know, you can get a smaller tank than that. When people talk about performance brakes, they talk about rotors and they talk about calipers. And these are important things, but man, the action is happening down on the pads. And not all pads are created equal. Well, Performance Friction Brakes has used their considerable racing experience to come out with some street pads called the carbon metallic pad. Now, these not only give you considerable more stopping power, but they're quieter and they last a lot longer than your stock pads. And you can get them for just about any application. So, if you tow heavy loads, or if you have a performance truck and you want it to stop when you push the fat pedal in the middle, you need to upgrade your pads with Performance Friction Brakes. With all the things on the market today to give your diesel engine more power, sometimes it's easy to overlook the obvious. The more cool, dense air you get into the engine, the more power you're going to have. It's that simple. That's why Gale Banks has come out with these intercoolers that they call the Technicooler. Now, they've got these to fit Ford, Chevy, and Dodge diesel trucks, and they slide right in place of your stock little skinny intercooler. Now, they come with all the hoses and the hardware and the high-flowing intake, so you get more cool, dense air into the engine. Now, on top of that, the Technicooler is completely compatible with whatever speed equipment or programmers or exhaust systems you might be using, making this one of the best upgrades that you can do to a diesel engine.